All rise, the Honorable Judge Court Zeppernick presiding. Please be seated. Court is in session. I'm Court Zeppernick, and it's that time again. Time for you, the jury at home, in your car, listening to your AirPods, etc., to be at the epicenter of the hottest topics and issues that engulf everything that there is about the greatness in sports. So let's get to it. It's an exciting time in pro football if you're a Chiefs or Eagles fanatic, for example, an ambivalent time if your fidelity is towards a team such as the Buccaneers or the Raiders, and an absolutely dreadful time if your allegiance is towards the Cardinals or the Bears, with all those ends of the spectrum being turned into the diverse melting pot of good to great to bad to beyond repair awful teams in the NFL. Perhaps the biggest enigma is, where do the Rams fall right now? Let's talk about the Rams for a moment. At this time, the Rams have looked like a promising scientific concoction that has been built in the lab that has all the potential in the world. And at other times, Rams fans and head coach Sean McVay got to be thinking like the scene in the HBO critically acclaimed film Paterno, where Al Pacino portraying Joe Pa, in the scene where he annoyingly murmurs to himself, "Put me in the ground." It's been that type of year for the Rams, peaks and valleys type of year for Los Angeles. That brings up the lingering question, can the Rams become elite again under Sean McVay in the NFC? I'm answering that inquiry with a solid big N-O, or at least anytime soon. First off, the Rams have been sublime, don't get me wrong, under Sean McVay since he took over the team in 2017. Relatively obscure in the offensive coaching ranks prior to his arrival in LA, McVay immediately led a laughingstock team like the Rams in the highly competitive NFC West to the NFC wildcard during the practical infancy of his coaching era, and then subsequently to the Super Bowl in 2018. A disappointing 2019, yes, and then 2 years later finally seized his hands on the Lombardi Trophy at home at SoFi against the Bengals in a nightmarish type of night in the pocket for Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. However, has Sean McVay now been figured out? Has it caught up to him? Has his brilliant offensive acumen, McVay's bailiwick as to why he's been hired in the first place, been compromised? Maybe so. Right now, the Super Bowl win against the Bengals 2 years ago almost, has been more of a liability going forward as opposed to an asset. Last year, when star Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp went down with injury, the entire offense sputtered early on and never looked the same. And then the extension of the generationally talented defensive tackle Aaron Donald comes, and the Rams defense doesn't look quite right, and there's a lot more questions than answers. Bottom line, the Rams finished 5-11 in 2022, the worst year under the McVay era, and more losses forever for the reigning Super Bowl champion, the most. The Rams were also the 17th team, obviously, to miss the ensuing postseason after winning it all. So talk about an everlasting Super Bowl hangover, right? Yeah. Have they recovered this season? No. And the reason largely being is Kyle Shanahan and their rival, the 49ers, up in San Francisco, and their inability to win the marquee matchup at home this year against teams such as the Eagles. The 49ers, though, who even during the Rams Super Bowl winning season in 2021 have flat out dominated. It's not even a rivalry, the Rams, under head coach Kyle Shanahan. The 49ers have won 8 consecutive regular season games against the Rams, and the Rams got a serendipitous reprieve from that exact utter domination when it mattered the most in the 2021 NFC Championship game against the 49ers this year, or that year. But when they had already been swept in the regular season. So it mattered most, but it didn't matter at the same time. Aligning with the parallels of the 2016 Cowboys that come to mind, who were in the division but were swept by the Giants that same year in the NFC East before, of course, vanquishing by the Packers. They know this all too well in the NFC divisional round. Back to the Rams and 49ers saga, however, in terms of winning the NFC West this year and earning an advantageous ranking if the Rams can reverse their season's misfortunes and make it to the postseason. Because of the 49ers being on their schedule with a road trip to the Bay Area still in store, no way that's happening. No way the Rams can get back to their elite status, at least not this year, until they conquer the woes, not only against the 49ers, but teams that are beatable at home and on the road. Now, don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. Losing to the Steelers at home and heading to Dallas next week to face the Cowboys is not a walk through a spring meadow, but losing in alarming fashion with the all-pro receiver Cooper Kupp back, giving up explosive big-time plays in the secondary on an experienced defense, a defense that still has developed over the years, a lot of continuity in terms of experience on the field together, playing together, despite Jalen Ramsey heading elsewhere, will not make you an elite contender in the NFC crown race, let alone a wild card spot for that matter. To be pragmatic, the degree of difficulty for the Rams' schedule does soften during the tail end of the season, with several subpar teams that the Rams will face coming to town and playing them on the road. But will it be enough? Figuratively speaking, I'm following the drinking gorge with this team, and it's not leading me anywhere anytime soon. The verdict, can the Rams become elite again in the NFC? No. And to college football, to the ranks now. Hang on a minute, Bronny. There will be plenty of time back in the nepotism limelight role as a player at USC this year. But for now, staying in Los Angeles, USC football is the focus of the attention, making the transition with some mild to moderate jet lag side effects with those cross-country flights to Piscataway to face Rutgers at noon, to the Big Ten Conference, along with other soon-to-be former Pac-12 staples, Oregon, UCLA, and Washington. How good will USC be in the Big Ten beginning competition play in 2024? The answer, very good. Look, when it comes to sports at every level, I am lenient towards being a conservative and traditionalist in the context of playing rivalry games, playing dates, celebration, neutral site locations, etc. Those rivalry games with those Pac-12 newcomers, hence USC versus UCLA, Washington versus Oregon, remain intact. The bottom line, why USC has a chance to be an instant competitor in the Big Ten altogether, along with the three other newcomers, is that the Big Ten has been starved of talent and legitimate competition for decades. When has there ever been a consistently ranked team, powerhouse team in the conference besides Ohio State over the past 20 to 25 years? Sure, Michigan would get in the number 5 once every year in the rankings, and Penn State always, when it's all said and done, ends up at 15th. But when it's all said and done, as I mentioned, and you don't even have to begin to bring up the joke, the absolute horrid joke that is the Big Ten West, and every other team besides the cluster of Ohio State and Michigan only as of late. Why does Ohio State, for example, get to face these practical intramural Big Ten teams each year as Michigan State and Purdue win convincingly to no surprise, like no one saw that coming, yet still show weaknesses and soon to be exposed coaching inexperience and gaps that are just a matter of time before they play a top-tier SEC team, get exploited, and they capitalize on it if/when Ohio State gets that opportunity or gets that far, beat their toughest competition annually, which in reality is maybe a step above those aforementioned Michigan State and Purdue teams in recent memory, and aforementioned Penn State and Ohio State, who Ohio State has beaten Penn State 15 of the past 16 times, and no surprise, and then defeat Michigan, who is even worse than Penn State over the past 2 decades when you think in depth about it. Then students and alumni after that in Columbus and the playoff committee, in some indoctrinated type of way, manufactures this narrative saying that beating Penn State, beating Michigan time and time again within the conference, 2 teams that have never had the amount of talent recently, recruiting-wise, as the Buckeyes, especially under the current and previous coaching regime in Columbus, and simply just the best of the worst compared to various premier SEC teams that Ohio State has played, is tantamount to its signature win every year, which then results in a college football playoff berth. Look, Ohio State is 2-10 all time against the SEC, which is sad and frankly kind of humiliating considering that Ohio State's roster every year is just a mixture of Alabama, Georgia, and LSU's all in one. Who is also why, and this is long overdue, the playoff expansion. The playoff coincidentally begins next year, expanding to 12 teams. Sure, the magnitude of the regular season games, the ticker symbol of the stock will drop a point or two, but the structure and organization of the 12-team playoff format will every year going forward produce a rugged, battle-tested champion where you'll have no choice but to tip your hat to whoever wins it all. That's already established. Everybody in college football in Columbus that follows the Buckeyes knows as well as I do that there are no Devontae Smiths or Najee Harrises or Jamar Chase or Justin Jeffersons or Tim Tebow's and lastly Cam Newtons or Percy Harvins in the talent-inept Big Ten besides the players that already pre-exist on Ohio State. And that's even stretching it the silly putty a little bit to give them that generous comparison when they have or could never have beat any of those players I just mentioned. And you know as well as I do in Columbus that the players on teams such as Maryland and Rutgers aren't exactly can't-miss blue-chip prospects who want to make it to the pros, who are playing at a school like Maryland or Rutgers in the first place because they have to, not because they particularly want to. So when you add USC into the equation and these new teams joining the Big Ten, those days of padding your resume against a team like Maryland and Rutgers or teams without a pulse and getting rewarded for it are in peril. Now, don't get me wrong. The top teams in the Big Ten, Ohio State and for now Michigan, let's say, are better and will beat all these new teams. It's only a matter of time when that eventually comes. But something tells me, just a little bit of an intuition, that playing USC as opposed to a typical unranked 8-4 team, here we go again, such as Wisconsin, representing the horrid Big Ten West, is a slightly more competitive upgrade than what it was been since 2011 during the Big Ten Conference's championship's inception. USC, under offensive guru Lincoln Riley, isn't even officially a conference member yet, but already has nearly matched Ohio State's talent level, and it has definitely surpassed Michigan and Penn State's recruiting talent level at every front on the offensive side and building on the defensive side. Everywhere but the offensive line. I mean, think about it. Yes, SC's defense is abysmal. Better off putting the 2025 Mater Day high school freshman team out there. But right now, as of this season, does any Big Ten team appear to consistently look like they could beat USC 55-49? There has never been a team that just scores at will like the Trojans do in the Big Ten, except for Ohio State. Lincoln Riley has already faced one Big Ten team in 2017 and won. That Big Ten team was Ohio State in Columbus during Riley's inaugural tenure at Oklahoma. Now, on a weekly basis, teams such as Ohio State and Michigan could feasibly be seeing electrifying speed and current can't miss true freshman Zachariah Branch on a punt return. A screen that looks totally enveloped by the defense, and then you blink your eyes and Raleek Brown is off to the races. A 14-0 deficit at the Coliseum or in Indy for the Big Ten Championship with Malachi Nelson at quarterback on traditional Lincoln Riley's quarterback Heisman train. All of these daunting possibilities right off the bat when an explosive offensive mastermind like Riley and the speed and the athletes and the overall competence like the Big Ten has never seen before lined up mano-a-mano on the turf. All that just to qualify for the postseason, screaming hallelujah. That doesn't even include the newcomers of Oregon, the wonderful job that head coach Dan Lanning has done with the Ducks. And to quote Chris Fowler and the current Washington Huskies defensive nightmare air raid philosophy that has extinguished 90% of the opponents that head coach Kalen DeBoer's Washington Huskies have faced when they join the Big Ten next year. So the verdict on if USC can be an instant competitor to win the Big Ten, you bet you. Yes. This court is adjourned. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm Court Zeppernick, and this has been Court is in Session.